as usual, guys, same thing as usual. Please say something in the Twitch chat. I know I feel like a broken record. I'm always saying this, but say something in the Twitch chat so that I know that everything is broadcasting properly and you can see what you need to see. Like I want to make sure everything's working properly, basically. Poor Josh didn't really know that he was going to be a demo this term, but well. Oh well. Oh, so yeah, I'll check the Twitch screen really quick here. You guys are here? Yes? Nope, not yet. Come on. What is going on? I'm able to draw them down, but not get it into edit mode. Oh, there we go. No. Oh no. I don't want immediately this demo to crash and burn. I have just started. Oh man. Okay. Good. One more time. Draw down the head. That's it. Then go into edit mode. Okay, that took a second for some reason. Not sure why. All right, he already has a shirt, but I'm going to pretend the shirt isn't here. Obviously switch my matte cap from the really crappy red wax to the basic material. This might not be the best for skin. I want to reiterate that. So ZBrush doesn't have the best skin materials. It's part of why we render in Keyshot or in Arnold. There are skin materials, by the way, like polyskin. And you can, of course, hit Shift-R and render just to see how it looks like. The problem is that ZBrush, again, is not a physical-based renderer or PBR renderer. So it's never going to give you the results that Keyshot or Arnold will give you, unfortunately. So that's about kind of as good as it's going to get. We can play with our lighting a little bit, but that's really not what this demo is about. So I don't really want to worry too much about lighting and rendering in ZBrush, because hopefully you're going to be doing it in Arnold or in Keyshot. Ideally Keyshot, but really I'm open to any physical-based renderer. Okay, so he already has a shirt, but that's part of this sort of demo, is how do we create one that's not there? This should be separated, which it is in this case. So you always want your shirt to be a separate object, right? So that's the first thing I want to say, like right off the bat. If it exists as a separate object in real life, then it should exist as a separate object in 3D. It's the same idea. So the real question, I guess, is how do we create clothing in general? You know what? Let's do it this way. Let's jump from Josh here to, no, not the demo head, because that's going to load a different project. But let's do it for like demo soldier. If it's a ZTL, by the way, we can jump to a different ZTL. We're not going to lose this ZTL. I really want to emphasize this. If we open up a new project, then we're going to lose the project we're working on. So I never want to open up a new project while I'm working on something, because that will open this up, whatever it is you're opening, and get rid of what you have on the screen. So you lose work that way. Obviously, save your work if you're going to open up a different project. I'm going to instead go to a different tool, such as the demo soldier. And I know that I was just about to work on Josh, but kind of the shirt's kind of already done for him. So let's just do it on a different mesh. Let's do it on this guy. By the way, Twitch, you guys here? Yes. Beards. Yes, so many beards. I'm making mine while I'm... All right, beards, yes. Control D for divide up. We want to divide up to a point where we have something that's relatively smooth. Now, from here, the way that we want to create our clothing, and let's maybe make a sweater. I feel like that's what I was saying earlier that I wanted to do. We want to create it from an extraction. And we also have to ask ourselves, how much of this are we going to see? Are we going to see the whole body? Well, this is a portraiture class, so the answer is no. But we would mask what we want for this, this shirt or sweater or whatnot. So how do we do this? Turn on symmetry. That's X, of course. I use the mask lasso, and then from here, begin to mask where you want the sweater to be. And by the way, you can also, I mean, if you're doing full body, just go ahead and get the whole body. Yeah, miss the middle. So cool. There we go. This is, and also we can remove some of this from the back here, but I want to mention that when you're using lasso is going to go through to the other side. So if you don't want the mask to go through to the other side, then use mask pen. That's a primary difference you should understand. Mask pen will never go through the other side. Mask lasso will. So just a fair warning there, just so you know, right? Get the mask looking more or less what you want the geometry to look like. Now from here, what do? We use extract. That's down here. So extract. And extract will make a new object from the mask. So we click extract, and there we go. That's a pretty bulky sweater. So this is where we want to kind of play around with the thickness, and this is very sensitive. Don't worry, this is not an object yet. It won't be an object until I click the accept button. And the thickness is very sensitive, right? So then extract. That's much closer to what I'm looking for. But you can also see how sensitive this is. Very, very sensitive. There we go. Now, the other slider here is smooth. And so if you wanted something smoother, especially up here, if you have a jagged mask, like it's not very smooth or not as smooth as maybe you wanted, then turning the smoothness way up, I mean, even max it out, will make sure that I get a very smooth edge when I extract. So I click the extract button, I double check stuff, it looks pretty good to me. If I'm happy with it, then I can click accept. And when I click accept, I have a sweater. I mean a body that's been duplicated. I mean an extraction. I mean, here is where it's like, well, a sweater isn't going to necessarily have all these muscles in it, for example, you know, and it's also going to mimic the topology of what you extracted it from. So there's a few different things going on here. First of all, polygroups. We probably don't want so many polygroups. We can hit Control W. That will clear out my polygroups. Now I just have one. From here, we could do a little sculpting because it's a sweater. And so it being a sweater, maybe you want to just kind of smooth this stuff out because, I don't know, sweaters don't normally hug. If it's maybe a really, really, really tight sweater might hug your muscles so much and get just this perfect musculature. You're probably not going to have that with a sweater, especially a loose fitting sweater. So then you can start to smooth this out a little bit, and that would be fine. And since I think some of you guys are wondering about cloth, like what to do about cloth, what do you do about cloth? Well, you use cloth simulation is what you should do about cloth. But if you don't have cloth simulation available to you, you can also sculpt cloth. If you're going to sculpt cloth, you really should be looking at some reference. And you know me, of course, I'm just like reference. Blah. No, I should really be using reference for everything all the time, always, forever. Let's just sort of do a little bit of sculpting, just really quick. Not a lot. Oh, by the way, if you have an area down here which is jagged or weird, so if for some reason, you know, you've accidentally pulled out some stuff that you didn't mean to and make kind of weird jagged lines down here, it's really not a big deal. Hold down Control and Shift, switch to your clip curve, and you could actually use your clip curve. Control Shift activates it, Alt will make it bend, and you could just clip it. See? So that's a good way to clean up weird edges. Just use your clip curve. and that kind of cleans up your weird edges. All right, but back to sculpting some folds. I'm not going to go too far with this, but here's how I would do it. There's lots of different ways to do this, and again, look at reference, but if you use mask lasso here and you think about where are the folds coming from, where are they going, the shoulders are contact points, so they're definitely going to be folds coming out from the contact points. So it's just a question of where are you sculpting these folds out from the shoulders. These should not be symmetrical, by the way, so turn off symmetry, and really you should be looking at reference. So forgive me while I break my own rules as usual. So what's new in the world? So I'm imagining, while I make these triangles, that his shoulder is kind of pushing out against the sweater a little bit. And, when you're making these, make triangles, or in this case, kind of a U shape. Wherever the points of contact, like the shoulder is a point of contact, right? So I feel like the shoulder is a good example of where these folds would be coming out from, And for God's sakes, look at reference. Don't just guess. Like what I'm doing is bad in the sense that you shouldn't be just guessing at where your folds are doing. Not good. But once I have some sort of ideas of where these folds might be going, Control and Alt, by the way, will let you remove, of course. Got to go a little faster here. But from here, we can basically sculpt some folds if we want to with a little bit of clay buildup. We don't necessarily need the square alpha. We can even turn the alpha off. And like so much else you've done in this class, just use your clay buildup. And hey, look, it's kind of cool here. You can hide your folds by hitting Control H. And then that way, when we sculpt across this or when we build this up, you can see the idea here. See? And then smooth back. Anyway, that's kind of one way to sculpt some folds, is to build up across some masking and then smooth back. Just one way to do it. If you're a cool kid, then maybe you're using cloth sim, which is awesome if you're that person. But this is just another way to do it. Something else I want to mention, especially if you have the masking on, is you can Control click and then blur out the mask as well, because this should be a very soft and gentle process building up these folds. You don't want to be too aggressive with it. You just kind of want to figure out where the folds are going and smooth as you work, as usual. You're supposed to say, that's a lot of clicking, and that's not, it's like, shouldn't you be using a stylus? Yes, of course, you're right. All right. Of course you should be using a stylus. Who does the trackpad thing? Apparently me. Terrible. All right, so some really, really rough folds. Not at all that great. You could even invert it if you wanted to. Hold down Alt and go the opposite direction. So by holding down Alt, of course, I'm pushing instead of pulling. Anyway, some very rough folds. Not great, but that's one way to do it anyway. Not as great as Cloth Sim by a long shot. All right. So folds. Oh, one last thing about folds. I almost forgot. If you want to, you can also use your move brush. Again, do this gently. And gently pull, using Alt, pull the material up. using Alt, and then even over, you know, even over the mask. So that's something else you can do too if you wanted to. Just pull these guys down. Stuff and stuff, more stuff. Sculpt and folds. Right. All right. So I'm going to move past that now. So don't go crazy with your folds too much if you haven't made your UVs yet. So that's something I actually do really want to emphasize. You don't want too much drapery or folds if you don't have UVs. So if you don't have any UVs at all, right, then adding too many folds like this is really going to hurt you in the long run if you haven't made your UVs first. So please, I repeat, don't run cloth sim. Don't run cloth sim, and for God's sakes, don't sculpt your clothing until you have your UVs. So I guess I'm sort of jumping the gun a little bit. I was so like into sculpting folds that I forgot I don't have UVs. Don't make that mistake. You got to have UVs before you have any folds in your cloth. All right. So UVs. Let's worry about that first. This topology is okay. It's kind of dense, but we want to create UVs here. So I'll duplicate this shirt or sweater just once. Duplication for insurance purposes. I always say that, but really it's because if you're going to Z-remesh something, then maybe you want the detail back. If you want the detail back, then you want to make sure that you duplicate the object. So here, under geometry, Z-remesh this guy. Let's try 10 for 10,000. Click Z-remesh. Cool. Now we have relatively clean topology. By the way, you can Z-remesh this again if you want to. So if you feel like you could even go lower, you can Z-remesh as many times as you need to. Each time you Z-remesh, you're going to get closer and closer to the target poly count, which is 5,000, I think. Well, now it is. Yeah, 5 for 5,000. So why you might want to do that is because the lower your poly count, the easier it is to make UVs. So now I have something very low poly, like this, and it should be very easy to make UVs now at this point. So the question is, how do I make UVs on something like this? And the answer is very simple. How is your shirt or sweater made, right? So that's what you have to ask yourself. And the answer is always going to be, well, where are the seams? The seams go down the arms, don't they? And they go down the inside of the body. So that's kind of where we want our UVs to be. Well, how do we do that? And the answer is masking. Turn perspective off. And do your best, hold down the shift button, and do your best with your masking. And this is a little bit difficult without a stylus. But do the best you can to create a straight line between loops of edges. Now we hit Control W, and then we can see, oh, that worked really well, except for that. So again, use your lasso to make sure that you get those edges. Hit Control W again, and if you need to just do it over again, well, I mean, just don't be afraid to be kind of aggressive with the lasso. Just remember that it's going to go through. I repeat, it's going to go through to the other side. So this is why my perspective is currently off right now. Man. All right, go to the next loop over. I really don't think I should, but you know what? I'm going to force the issue. Yay. We'd like to get as clean of a, imagine this is the seam going through your sweater. You want this to be as clean as possible. So if you need to, like I said, force the issue, go to the next edge loop, hit Control W. That's pretty close. I'm not really happy with this back here. Try one more. Yeah, that's good enough, I think. Ooh, we got some stuff in the body. Well, this is what I mean again about the problem with the lasso, right? Is that it does actually go all the way through the body. The pen doesn't. So if you need to hold down Control, switch to the pen. Hold down Control and Alt. Ooh, wait, it's not exactly what I want. Hold down Control, Alt on the model. Damn it, make a smaller brush. I'm using brackets right now to make my brush smaller. Control Alt. Just do your best to get the best results you can. I mean, this is a portrait class, so we're not really worrying that much about what the arm looks like. So this is, I'm getting a little OCD about this right now. I'm not super concerned about what my arm looks like, so I don't really care if the mask is absolutely perfect down there. I only care about the top. I'm gonna roll with it, even though the side of the body doesn't look great. Like this is not the best place for a scene. But like I said, we're not as worried. We're gonna crop it probably in here anyway, so I'm not that worried about it. Anyway, UVs, right? Now that we have a poly group, go to Z plugin, go to UV master, click unwrap with poly group. In this case, it actually is symmetrical, so you could use both symmetry and poly group. Click unwrap. Cool. Now we can test this. If it has no subdivisions, by the way, it's easy enough to test. We can click flatten. And there's my, excuse me, there's my sweater. And you can actually kind of see how jagged the edges are, not ideal, but if we want to move around our UVs, we can actually do this in ZBrush, believe it or not. This is kind of a cool trick. Watch how I do this. Control-Shift-Tap to isolate. Then with one poly group isolated, I can rotate my UV shell like that and move it into a more logical place. Then do the same thing over here. Clear my mask. Control-Shift-Tap twice. Then again, R for rotate. Remember that Alt will change the location of the pivot point. So if you'd like to, actually rotate from the center, you can hold down Alt. And then I just pack my UV shells according to the rules. And the rules state that you don't want overlapping UVs. So I'll move this up slightly, knowing that I don't want these UVs to overlap. And that looks pretty good to me. Not the best. I mean, I'd be able to make better UVs, say, in Maya. But for a quick and dirty UV job, there's a reason why I'm doing this, which I'm about to show you why. Okay. So, and interrupt me or stop me if you guys have questions. What are we doing here? Beards, 8:15. I think we're okay. So yeah, let's try to make a cool sweater at this point. See what we can do. I was kind of enjoying what Yasmin was doing with her striped sweater. It was pretty cool. So let's see if we can do something similar. I still have that duplicate object underneath it. It's not really that big of a deal, to be honest. This is the point at which you would make your folds. So if there were folds right now that you wanted to make, this would be the right time to do it because we now have UVs. So Control D, Control D, Control D. When I'm upping my divisions, I'd like to get past 1 million, usually to add detail. I'm only at 481,000, so Control D. Again, I'm almost at 2 million now. I feel like that's plenty, almost 2 million to do some sculpting. In fact, it might even be too much. But the point is, now would be the time for you to mask out the folds that maybe you wanted to create, wherever those may be. And again, this is also where you should really look at some cloth reference, right? Because I mean, guessing at folds is kind of silly. But since we wanted to do a little bit of sculpting, a little bit of A little bit of folds. Clay buildup, BCB. I turn my alpha off. You can hit Control H again to hide, and then very gently sculpt in some folds. And blend back, of course. So just so we have some kind of information here, you know. If we go to a lower subdivision by hitting Shift D, then at a lower subdivision, I'm down here at 120,000. These things become a lot easier to smooth also. But just be aware the shape of the mask will still be fairly sharp. So you can clear your mask, and by clearing the mask and using a very low Z intensity, then you can just very gently smooth and not worry so much. Okay, so I now have a slightly sculpted sweater with some kind of sculpted, sort of okay folds. Not great, but they're there. Now, adding the rest of the detail to the clothing here, this is sort of the interesting part, and it ties into the normal mapping as well. So what we need is a few million polygons. I think 2 million is okay, but we might even push this higher. So why? What's the big deal? Go to Surface, go to Noise, turn on your surface noise. You can click Frame at this point. We'll zoom in. Now, here, what are we doing? Well, our strength, our noise here, this allows us to turn up this kind of static noise. This can be useful, but for like the sweater, it's not that useful, right? It's just kind of, you can add a little bit of basic noise to this, but really, I wouldn't worry too much about the basic noise. But if you want to add it, you can. What you should instead worry about is what is the sweater made of? If I go to Noise Plugin, I can either, there's a couple different ways I can do this. I can either use the Noise Plugin to try to create stripes or something like that. Like, let's see. Stripes right there. Now, you should be seeing this actually on your model, but don't worry if you don't. So if you don't just initially see the stripes, don't worry about it. I mean, you can turn up the amplitude. You're supposed to be able to see it right now already as I turn up the amplitude. But if you don't, it's not really a big deal because they really won't show up until you pull up the strength. And then you should start to see, oh, yeah, they're the stripes, right? They're the wrong direction. And we have this basic noise. Zero out the basic noise. And then we just have the stripe, again, in the wrong direction. That's okay. It's not a big deal. We actually have these angles down here. If I wanted to, I could rotate the X, Y, or Z angle. So what I like to do is type in 90. I was hoping to not really... All right, not really getting the angles. Okay. It's kind of interesting. I guess it was a X angle after all. We want this to tile, so we take the plugin scale and we lower it. And as we lower it, we're going to see that the stripes tile more. We can turn up the strength too. And you're like, that doesn't look anything like it's supposed to. And I would agree with you. So I'm not sure if I'm feeling very good about this, about these wavy stripes. These are the sine waves, by the way. So like we could go back to the noise plugin, click edit. And instead of using, no, abnormal termination is always my favorite thing. This, I should also mention, does have a tendency to happen on the noise plugin more than anything else I've found. Yeah, I know. It's always on the noise plugin, by the way, that ZBrush usually crashes on the noise plugin. So Pixelogic, if you can hear me, that would be nice if you fix that, because it's almost guaranteed that noise plugin crashes ZBrush depending on your setup. It's just one of those things. All right, we should be able to bring that back. Hopefully it's in my quick save. At least it told me it was, so I'm hoping that I can bring it back. Let's find out. Covered document. Go with the one that says ZPR. ZBR is not a project. ZTL might work, but let's go with this one. All right, so this is kind of back to where we were. Now let's approach this a slightly different way. Instead of using the noise generator, or the plugin rather, I'd like to approach this a different way by typing in ZBrush Alpha. We're going to go to the download center, which is down here, the alpha library. And then we go to the alpha library and we can look to see if there's an alpha that works for this kind of cloth that we're trying to make. So we have under here textiles, and we could find something for this cable knit sweater, which this looks like, well, kind of a cable knit sweater. So I'm kind of excited about it. Let's see what happens. I'll call it cable zip, just so I know what it is. I don't know why it does that, but that's okay. I've got to unzip it. I was just watching Deadpool 2 the other night, and I'm like, I wonder if Cable is going to make another appearance. And maybe the Deadpool sequel. I wonder. It's like Josh Brolin didn't get enough playing Thanos. I think there was even a reference in Deadpool 2 about him, you know, playing Thanos. All right, so what's the difference here? What am I going to do differently? Now when I click on noise, I don't use the noise plugin because that's what's buggy. That's what's making ZBrush crash. Instead, and this is weird, so follow me. I hope you guys are paying attention. There's not really a button for this so much as a word. I don't know why. It's a button, it's a word, it's a button. It's what you want to click. So click the word alpha. Now load in cable. Oh, did it put it in a folder? It might have put it in a folder. Hold on. Really? Where'd you go? I swear to God it was on the desktop. No. Oh, there it is. Went right by it. So there it is. Cable. Yeah. Now, we don't want basic noise. I mean, we can turn up the basic noise later. We just want to see this cable knitting and how does it work. Let's turn up the strength. And it could go either direction, but there it is. Let's go the other direction. So we want to invert the strength. And that's starting to give me that cable knit effect, but it's huge. We could pull down the alpha scale. And now we're getting the cable knit sweater that we're after, kind of. But look what's happening. When I go to the side, it's all stretched and nasty and warped and weird. And that's because, well, frankly, I'm not using the UVs yet. I want to use the UVs that I just made. So how do I do that? Oh, look, there's a UV button. So click the UV button and then go back to playing with the alpha scale. Pull down the alpha scale, pull the noise intensity up, and then just play with this until you get the right, I think there, maybe? And at this point, you could also say that, well, the shoulders look weird, but yeah, that's because these should also be different UV shells. Is it too late to do that? Not really. You could make them separate UV shells and it will look better. So if you want your clothing to look better, just like in a real factory for clothing, your tailors are going to make these different pieces of cloth. So the sleeves would be a separate piece of cloth, wouldn't they? So this looks good, maybe all except for the arms, which don't look quite right. But getting better anyway. Definitely getting better. Not perfect, but better. So the noise isn't actually applied until you click Apply to Mesh. So we can turn this off temporarily. We can go back down to the lowest subdivision level. Hit Shift F to turn on wireframe. This is strange because I would swear the UVs were already done, but we can always click New from UV Check. Yeah, they are already done. But again, where's the seam? Is there going to be a seam here for the arm or not? I mean, it's really optional if you want to create it. On some clothing, it's there. feel like most it is, actually. So if you wanted to go that extra mile and make another poly group here and recreate your UVs, you could. I don't know right now if that's very important, because time, for one thing. Yeah, I'm already at 8:30. So I would rather not worry about that, even though I feel like the arms should be different UV shells. So instead of worrying about that, I'll go back to my surface noise. I'll turn on noise, turn off the wireframe, turn up my divisions until, see, I'm at the highest level? Yeah, I guess I am. So 1.926, about 2 million. All right. So if I'm happy with this, even though, again, I could arguably do a little bit of better work on the arms, but if I'm happy with this, then I can always click Apply to Mesh. So you click Apply to Mesh, and now it's been applied. We can actually do this more than once, and as you can tell, as I get closer, you're going to see it starts to look crunchy. Now the reason it starts to look crunchy is because I don't have enough polygons. You think 2 million is enough? No, 2 million is not enough, because 2 million is producing this crunchy effect, right? We want this nice smooth effect. So what's the problem? I'm only at 2 million polygons. Hit Control D for divide. Now I'm at 7 million polygons. Oh boy, here we go. Control D again. This is where your computer goes, my God, 30 million polygons? Are you kidding me? 30 million points, rather? Okay, I don't want to lie about this. It's not polygons, rather, it's 30 million points, but it's still a lot. So, but now, if we click Apply to Mesh, yeah, that's right, 30 million, then this should look pretty good. Now, don't worry, I repeat, don't worry if this is too many points to bring into Keyshot or Arnold. The whole point here is not to bring in 30 million points. The whole point is to actually make a normal map, which is how we transfer the detail, right? So that's the idea here. Okay, so that, see how much nicer that looks, how much cleaner that looks? That's perfect. If you wanted to do this a second time and you're like, no, I want the cable knitting to pop even more, then you're totally allowed to turn the noise back on, see how it's like even more pronounced, apply to mesh again. And then we're going to create something that has even more pop to it. And yes, this is at 30 million points. It's a lot. Don't interrupt ZBrush while it's doing this. So like I almost popped over to the chat, but let it do its thing, because if you push ZBrush at this point, this is where it's like liable to crash. So basically I would say let it do its thing for a minute, because if you push it here, it's where everything's going to crash and burn again. Ha! Fixed, finished, done. Right? So now we have a really nice cable knit thing. We could work a bit more on the seam. I actually do want to talk about that really quick. So really fast here, if you want something that looks like real clothing, you should push the seam in a little bit. I like to use dam standard BDS for this. And then the trick is, though, because if you use dam standard, see, there's your seam. It's working pretty well. But you really want to use lazy mouse to try to get as close to the original seam as possible. If you need to turn your wireframe on, that's a good idea, because now I can really trace this. So I go to stroke, I turn on lazy mouse, or hit the L button if you're like a cool kid. Turn on lazy mouse, turn up your lazy radius. Then very carefully trace that line as carefully as you can. And obviously, like the size of your seam here, you might want to make a much smaller dam standard brush. So a smaller dam standard brush at a relatively high Z intensity and a high lazy mouse. And then trace this, there we go, as closely as you can. And this is one type of seam I want to mention. Oh man, I just kind of missed a little bit, but I'm just going to keep going. We don't even need to use the whole body or arm, so I'm only using the top part of the body anyway. And you're like, that doesn't look that great, and I would kind of agree with you, but we can also use the pinch brush, so B for brush, P for pinch, and do the same thing, right? Then using lazy mouse, make sure lazy mouse is on, and do the same thing. Use your pinch brush, go back over the line you just created, and pinch that line back together, thereby creating a seam. Don't forget the 1 button will repeat. So if it doesn't look pinched together enough, you can always click the 1 button. Each time you click the 1 button, then this is gonna get pinched closer together. See, now the seam is being pinched closer together. And just press that 1 button until it makes sense for the seam. Okay. Anyway, that's how you would make seams, and if you were smart, you'd have your symmetry on, and guess who forgot to do that? Yeah. Anyway, definitely turn symmetry on when you're going to do something like that, because obviously now the other side needs to be done. But let's just keep moving, because again, time. We don't have much time. God, we really don't. Okay, so now I want to get this into Keyshot, right? So let's talk about that. I can't move 30 million points into Keyshot. I mean, I can. Keyshot will handle it a lot better than Arnold will, for sure, but it's still not a great idea, right? So then what do? This is where our normal map comes in. This is where we want to create our normal map. So go down to your lowest subdivision level, or not your lowest, but maybe your second lowest. It's really what looks good in Keyshot. So Shift D, Shift D, Shift D, Shift D, or Shift Divide obviously brings down your subdivision. Or if you want to go to the geometry slider and just bring it down to either the lowest. I'm not going to go to the lowest. I'm going to go to the second lowest. And you could even delete the lowest one if you wanted to. But I feel like Keyshot will handle this just fine. And where are we with point count? We're at like 30,000. That's fine. That's very reasonable. But the normal map creation, right? That's the key here. So then go down to normal map and create the normal map. Make sure it's at the lower subdivision level. Don't create the normal map up at, I don't know, 20 million or 10 million or even a million. Create the normal map from the subdivision that you're going to be exporting, whether you're exporting it to Arnold or whether you're exporting it to Keyshot, it doesn't matter. Just make sure that, like, if this is what you're going to export, this is where you should create the normal map from this subdivision. Oh no, don't. All right. Yeah, I guess I'm going to wait on this for a minute. Take any questions. I'm really going to hope that this comes back, because I just spent too much time to do all this over again. Yeah, frustrating. Oh, got it. It worked. Thank God. Got panicky there for a second. Whenever I see that the screen kind of gray out like that, I'm like preparing for the worst. But it did make the normal map. It's right there. You can see it. It worked. So now we can send this out. Here's what we do. As long as the normal map here is active, then we can use that nice FBX export. Don't export this at 1 million, please. Note that I'm exporting this at, what's the poly count right now? I'm exporting at 30,000. So then you export it at relatively low poly. I mean, not super low, but again, what looks good in Keyshot is all you need to worry about. FBX export, I think that PNG is fine. Visible subtool, embed maps. This is the important part. Make sure embed maps is on. Click export. And we'll call this sweater. I didn't do the collar though, but I was going to make that a separate object because, hey, you can totally make the collar a separate object if you want to. Because why? Because, well, as long as it's overlapping this, then nobody's ever going to know necessarily that it's a separate piece for the color. You can kind of hide that fact. All right, now, I don't have Keyshot open, so I'll do that now. And once I get this into Keyshot, we should see the normal map immediately right off the bat. Assuming that you followed correct procedure and you embedded the maps when you made the FBX, then it should appear like magic automatically, and we don't have to connect anything, right? So then we'll go to import sweater FBX. And there we go. Okay, so we do see an interesting problem though, and that the wireframe came in. It's not a big deal at all. It's just that the wireframe was left on as a texture. So that was an accident, which is easily rectified. In ZBrush, go back to texture map, go to the texture palette. This is if you had poly painting or if you had created a texture from your poly painting, you should leave this on. But we only have a wireframe on here, so turn it off. So that's the problem there. In other words, I would re-export also at this point. But yeah, anything that's active in the texture map, oh my God. You've got to be freaking kidding me. It crashed on export. Wow. That is... That's killing me. But it says I can restore it, so I hopefully quick save to the rescue. I hope. Again. Man. All kinds of problems today. All right, let's hope that I didn't lose all that, because I really don't want to do that again. I think we did. I think we're okay. We'll find out. $10 minutes. Oh my God. Not enough time. So the normal map has to be active here, but the texture map should be off unless of course you actually have a color texture that you want to use. I don't in this case, so I think I'll be okay without this. I don't have any poly paint that I've converted into a texture map. I just want to worry about my normal map. So again, let's try this export one more time. FBX export, embed maps, visible, export. Let's call it something else. Let's call it sweater 2. I don't think that should make a difference, but you know, why not? If it crashed on the last export. Yep, see? Worked fine. I don't know. Whatever. Back into Keyshot really quick. Sweater 2. Try to keep original checkbox on whenever possible. All right. So again, this should show up like your normal map should be intact. If it's not, we can export it separately, but it really should be. Come on. Show me the normal map. All right, it's totally not coming in with it. Oh, that's a great demo there, buddy. Come on. Of course, now it wants to autosave 30 million polygons. Clearly. the normal map. Click clone normal map. I'll try this one more time. Embed maps, PNG export. This should be it. And I mean, again, we can export the normal map separately if we need to. If we're going to export the normal map separately, and we might as well at this point, I'm kind of out of time, don't forget that we need to flip this texture vertically. That's one weird thing. I like the FBX export because it doesn't force you to flip the, see sweater 2 here, it doesn't force you to flip the normal map, but if you export it separately, it does. It's really a weird thing. But yeah, there we go. All right, one more time. Come on, I'm out of time for this. We have like 7 minutes left. So this time I've exported the normal maps, and so if for some reason they're not connected when I bring in the sweater this time, then I guess I'll just reconnect myself. Just fine. Yeah, I guess I'm just going to do it myself the old-fashioned way. All right, then. I want to make this work. Clearly not really getting any normal map information. So what do? This was really the question. What do I do about cloth in Keyshot? So we have a whole cloth folder, as you can see. Go to cloth here. And we have a bunch of different examples. Now, we can start with one of these. If you hold down Alt, then you're going to keep any textures you might have. In this case, we don't really have any textures, so holding down Alt did nothing. But we do have a bump map, so let's try and make this work. We have a normal map. Let's just try and make it work. Generally speaking, if you use FBX, this is going to be connected for you. But, oh no, did I export a PSD? Seriously? I might have. I don't know if that's going to work. We're going to find out really quick. Of course not. It just simply crashed. Man, I'm having all kinds of luck tonight. All right, when I export this out again, let's not use a PSD. PSD is a really finicky file format. It doesn't necessarily always work. So I just sort of immediately assumed that it was something other than PSD. I should not have assumed that. One more time, and that's all I have time for, because really we are about out of time. Basically, you want to make sure that your normal map is working in Keyshot as a, here we go, as a bump map, because that's what it is. A normal map is an advanced bump map, right? So then it's a more modern bump map, you could say. The old bump maps were just black and white. The normal maps are better. They're purple because most of the data is on the Z axis, or blue. Z is blue, right? Come on, Keyshot. There we go. Gotta hurry up. So like I keep saying, you're meant to, when you pull in the FBX, you're meant to have your maps connected for you automatically. But if you have to reconnect them yourself, I suppose it's worth going over. Here we go. So let's use the cloth material, not this one that it came with. So I'll go back to cloth and leather. And when I pull this over, I'm going to hold down Alt because I don't care about their cloth. I care about mine. So now I have this cloth material, and I can double click it. There we go. Now we're back to where we were before. I go to textures and I plug in this normal map, which is not a PSD file now. It's a BMP file. Come on. I don't know why it goes to that folder for some reason, but there it is. And there's the bump. Now, the mapping type is going to be wrong because the mapping type is box by default, switch to UV. And that's it. That should fix our problem, but we may need to, we want to turn this to normal map, and then we can turn on our bump height, or turn up our bump height. So like 5, for example. There is definitely something happening here, but your width and height are at a really weird number. So put these both to 1, and look at that. And we finally have our red sweater effect that we've been after as a normal map. It's getting there. So then at this point, if you had a diffuse color map to put in here, you could do that, but we don't. So I would just make this a solid color. I go to properties. I don't know what color we should make this, a red sweater, maybe, I don't know, let's go with dark red sweater. Sure. And then your specular color is going to be pretty pronounced here, but let's go ahead and make it sort of off red. So what we can do here is we can pick a light red color. And if it's not really doing anything for you, push it in a diagonal direction. And the diagonal direction is definitely going to do a lot more work here. Oop, that's too much. Too much. No, actually, no, it's not bad. I like it. I think this is working pretty well at this point. I don't know how you guys feel about it. You can always go back to your bump height and play with this. You could even invert it. What does it look like if I say -5? Oh, that's so much better. So in this case, the normal map was inverted. And boy, does that look a lot better. We could even push it absurdly high and say -10. And now we have a pretty cool cable knit sweater. One thing I didn't do that I was planning on doing, but I ran out of time, was to add a collar to this. And I was just going to make it a separate piece. I could use extract and extract just a collar and do something similar. Of course, we're in Keyshot, so adding a nice environment almost feels like it's necessary because like of your lighting, it's always going to look a lot better, like so much better once we put an HDR and environment in there. I think I'm out of time. Yep, I think that's about it, guys. But we do have a nice sweater. I don't know if you agree with me. Before I shut down Keyshot and or ZBrush, I need to ask you guys if you have any questions. Of course, cloth simulation is going to work better for the folds. Yes, I already know that. But I do feel like the cloth material looks really nice with a normal map. And of course, spending a little bit more time making these seams, see like the seam that goes down the arm here is another thing that you should definitely work on. But even the seam doesn't look that bad. If we zoom in. I'm like used to ZBrush controls here, so it's always like frustrating to me when the ZBrush controls don't work. And then I go to Maya controls and I'm like, it's still not zooming. But yeah, you can change your shortcuts in the Keyshot settings. Point is I have a nice seam. That's what I'm after. I have a nice seam that goes down the side of my arm. And nothing is stretched or warped incorrectly. It's all stretched and warped pretty well, all except for this part. Again, if I had made separate UV shells for the sleeves, then this would make a little bit more sense. I wouldn't get this weird warping down here, which is the only part that I'm not particularly happy with. Well, that's okay. I mean, if we're only going to get the top of this anyway, then if this doesn't look right, we're not going to see it. Doesn't really matter. Again, it's kind of back to creative cropping. So if we're only using the shoulders and up, then who cares how bad this looks, because we're only worried about what's up here. I guess that's it. So let me check to see if you guys have questions for me. No questions. Okay, well, we're at the end anyway, so I guess if that's it, then I will stop the demo. Say goodnight.